Welcome once again to Salem, Massachusetts at the Green Party of the United States Annual National Meeting in 2019. Earlier this morning, we had a press conference introducing you to some Greens who are seeking elected office. And at this press conference, we're going to talk to some Green Party members who have become elected officials. They'll talk to us about the work that they do as Greens and as elected officials. Yes, we do have people elected to office. In fact, several hundred. Actually, over 1,000, in fact, by the time we have started until now. My name is Holly Hart. I'm with the Media Committee. And if you have questions about the press conferences, other events happening through the weekend, you can get information by going to gp.org and looking at 2019 Salem, or you can also write to media@gp.org, and we'll get back to you from there. I want to just mention to people this press conference is taking place this morning, Friday. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, there is one more press conference. This will be a candidate kickoff announcement for David Gibson, who is running for U.S. Senate from Maine. This will be the first ever U.S. Senate race using ranked choice voting. So that's at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and at night at 7 tonight, our presidential candidate forum featuring presidential people seeking candidates seeking the presidential nomination for the Green Party. That forum will be tonight at 7 in the recital hall here at Bertolin. I want to introduce our host for this press conference, David Doonan. David Doonan is himself a former elected office holder. He has been mayor of Greenwich, New York, and I know I pronounced that correctly because he told me. Greenwich, New York, a former mayor. He is also the web manager for the Green Party of the United States, and as an employee, he is also a member of the IWW and the Steward the Steward, is that the correct? Shop Steward. Sorry, as Shop Steward. We are the only political party in the country that is unionized. So want to introduce Dave Doonan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly. It's a real privilege to be here in Salem and a special honor as a former elected official to introduce additionally other elected officials. It's a real honor to do that, and Holly, thank you for asking me to do this. First up, we have Charlene Delicano, who is the library trustee from the town of Berlin, Massachusetts. Charlene, come on up.
Thank you, David. That is to say, my name is Charlene DeCalagero. I'm from Berlin, Mass. And I am proud to say that I am one of 15 electeds and appointeds currently serving in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I want to talk a little bit about why I am a library trustee. I am one of 3 elected library trustees serving in my town of between 3,000 and 3,500 folks. Of course, population is always a moving number. We are slowly growing. And the reason why I work as an elected in the town of Berlin, in my region, and in the state of Massachusetts is because libraries help prevent truth decay. Libraries in Massachusetts are some of the jewels of our state. We pride ourselves as a state in supporting education and having high quality education. Unfortunately, since fiscal year 2001, library budgets have been consistently cut such that in the current year, 19 years later, we are still behind in our state funding from where we were in fiscal year 2001. So I advocate for funding not only in my town, because towns do a lot of the funding of their libraries, but also at the state level. One of the things that makes small town libraries viable, including my town library, which has a very small building, cozy, people like to call it. The reason why it's viable is because we are part of the Central and Western Massachusetts lending network that gives us access to millions of items in a matter of a few days, generally speaking, if the item is available. But that particular service where materials are shipped around our region is very underfunded, and of course costs for the fuel to fuel the trucks, costs for the people who do the driving, and other costs are of course greater than they were 19 years ago. So we are ramping up. Myself and other Greens, my colleague David Spanigal also serves as library trustee in Lancaster, and we visit our legislators. We write and call. We also communicate with the governor to say, this cannot continue. Libraries are an absolutely critical lifelong learning resource. It is the only service that's free to all from infancy to ripe, mature age. And it is also a very critical part of our larger educational system. It is shocking that in the state that has the highest per capita income in the country, that we have schools that have no school libraries functioning. They have been closed for lack of funding for staff and for lack of funding for materials. My small town still has a school library in our elementary school, and it's only staffed with a librarian 2 days a week, and their materials budget is $200 a year. This makes their library close to non-functional. They're doing the best they can, as librarians and educators always do. And it means that our town library is partnering closely to fill in those gaps. But what we really need is fully funded libraries, the same way we need fully funded education, public education at all levels. And that's one of the critical things I do as a Green in office. I plan to also, we also have programs. This fall we will be hosting a program that deals with the climate emergency. Libraries are public forums. Libraries enable unfettered access to materials. One of my favorite weeks out of the year, favorite in that sort of funny way that we're acknowledging the role of libraries in fighting censorship, is Banned Books Week. And it's really important to notice that, you know, SpongeBob SquarePants has been banned in some places in this country. And libraries are in the forefront of making sure you have access to all materials. We also help support low-income people who need access to computers and printers to search for jobs, to start businesses. And it's also, you know, everybody sort of thinks, well, I love the library, but, you know, what does it really cost? Well, library funding in Massachusetts recently was calculated to be 0.06% of the state budget. So I think that we not only can afford libraries, we can't afford not to fully fund them. So I am going to hand off the microphone so we can talk, hear from another elected from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Charlene. Any questions for Charlene? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Tar Larner, who's a member of the Housing Board in the fabulous city of Concord. Here you go, Tar.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
And isn't it wonderful, Charlene's advocacy? She's also very, very important on our state level party. I'm Edward Larner. I just recently was reelected to a second 5-year term at the Housing Authority. And I wanted to talk a little bit about green values and how they can be interpreted into an elected position. You know, the main thing that I told people about my advocacy for the Housing Board was that I believe in consensus. And if anyone has had experience with local government, the consensus could be rather hard to achieve. People take positions and it gets rather, so we worked pretty hard not to have that happen with the housing board. The first real project we took on was we had to hire an executive director for the housing authority. We have 228 units in Concord, and it's the housing executive director really runs it. The board just oversees, and the only other real main function we have is hiring a replacement, and she was retiring. The powers to be that have been on the board for quite a while set up an executive search committee. They hired outside people to find the appropriate executive to fill in. But I was upset that we hadn't looked at the agency employees that were under the executive director, and I felt we had someone who was qualified with 20 years of service, but the other people wanted really a more executive position, a person to fill the position, and so we had a sort of a battle that went on for about a year, and they finally realized that they weren't going to find the high-level executive they were going to find, but we had somebody, and she was, was hired and has been doing an excellent job. The second thing that is a real accomplishment, money-wise, is we in Concord we still have what we call town meeting, and that's a kind of a New England tradition where everybody in town comes and votes on how much money goes to the schools, how much the police get, and it can be contentious. It goes on for 4 days and fills up the high school. It's a great thing to do. After a few years, you kind of get a little bit tired of listening to all the speeches back and forth. And there are a few people that always have to have their say. But anyway, we originally worked with the Housing Foundation in town to create a fund, taxes on either tear downs of houses or actual renovation of houses that increase the size of the houses to above 3,500 square feet, and that's where we kind of defined what a McMansion was. We were seeing all these little houses that were built after World War II and being replaced on a very small lot with $3 million homes, and it was changing the character of our town. So it took us a couple of years, but we came up with funding this year for approximately $4.5 million a year in order to purchase these smaller houses before they can be torn down or actually build things. So it took a lot of consensus. There were 3 different housing organizations. We basically were housing management. We managed 228 units, but we became an advocate for affordable housing, and it's been a real success. So I really feel that this idea of consensus, which is one of what I consider a prime Green Party value, is really important and really worked out for us well. And I've got another 4 years to see how we're going to spend this money. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Hal. Any questions for Hal?
So I wanted to ask, in what kind of input do the residents have as you're making these decisions, hiring an executive? How's the input process? If I live in one of these units, how do they get their voices heard?
That's another thing that we've been doing this year is setting up what we call a local tenant organization. And Massachusetts had a real problem a few years ago when they had a reform bill that was passed in 2014 because basically the housing authority in Chelsea, the housing director had stealing about $1 million and putting all his relatives in the units, and it was really a run-down place, and so it had to be reformed. And the state has come up with money to train the tenants on how to stand up for their rights. And the housing department in Massachusetts has very strong regulations for the rights of tenants. So we organized the tenants. It was like herding cats. We started with 10 tenants that really wanted to be involved, or 12 tenants that really wanted to be involved, and they, by the time we were done, we were down to 5. But we had our election, we created a board, and we're ready to work. And it's inspiring to the tenants to realize what their rights are. So this is important. The administration, which we oversee, tries very hard to pull the tenants in, but there's a lot of resistance to going in and complaining. People feel because they're in low-income housing, they don't have the right to say, hey, my water's not working properly, and things like that. So it's a matter of education, and I think we're working. We've made some progress with setting up our own tenant organization. Most of the big cities like Cambridge and Brockton and Boston itself have these. It's in the smaller towns that it's just harder in the suburban areas to get smaller things together like that. So, okay, I answered your question.
Yeah, it did very good. And I have a follow-up too. You talked about some underlying issues. So what can you do, the problem of poverty, low employment, childcare, that kind of stuff. What can you do as a housing board member to look at some of these other underlying issues that create these housing problems?
Oh, sure. There are several agencies in town that deal with, there's the social services agency and veterans agencies. Even in the schools, they have things. And so we are kind of a nexus of that because we have quite a few tenants that have kids in school. We have seniors, we have veterans, and so we work with the Council on Aging, and there's also an advocacy group for the aged in town. We have worked with the schools about letting use our facilities for tutoring after school in the afternoons. As far as job training and stuff like that, really, we're not big enough, in our small. We only have 16,000 people in our town, so that's not something that we're doing. But we do advocate, for people. The state has now centralized their wait list for affordable housing, and so that means we're going to get more people that are less suburbanized and people that want to move out of an urban environment and into a suburban one. There's also a resistance to this. People want to stay with their cultural groups and so forth. So there's issues that have to be worked out. But I think we're being proactive is the best way to deal with things as they come up.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you all.
Thank you, Tar. Our last speaker is Michael Stewart from South Carolina. He's a member of the Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. Come on up, Michael. And hopefully you can talk a little bit about your role as a commissioner, because this is a type of position that does not exist up north. So if you could talk a little bit about not just your role as a commissioner, but also about the commission itself. So thank you, Michael.
It's a pleasure to be here and represent South Carolina. It's also an honor to be back in my home state of Massachusetts, where I lived for 35 years. Moving to the South was kind of an eye-opening experience coming from Massachusetts. And I saw the growth of the state in South Carolina, but particularly the region where I lived in. And we're seeing uncontrolled growth, both residential and retail, subdivisions which really divide the community, unlike connected communities here. And I was thinking at the time when I moved there, how that impacted the environment and our natural resources. If you know anything about Greenville, South Carolina, it's nowhere near the coast. We're about 3 hours away in the upstate, right by the mountains. So we have some of the freshest, cleanest water, some of the most pristine areas of wilderness, and that's all being threatened by our growth. So in 2016, I decided that I wanted to run for Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. No one was on the ballot, unfortunately, at that time when I was trying to learn about how to file for that. We had missed the deadline. So we were really prepared for 2018. There were 2 open seats on the commission. I decided to run. We collected 200 signatures. We needed 100 to get on the ballot, which is really challenging for a nonpartisan position. We were able to achieve that and qualified with just over the minimum required. And we went into the election and we did really well, and we won. We beat out the head commissioner. So a little bit about that role. It's an advisory position and an education position and a supervisory position. So it's a commission of 5 people. 2 are appointed, 3 are elected, and those are in staggered terms. A little bit about the commission. We do a lot of, like I said, educational work, and that's a lot of our primary focus. So we oversee a staff And we have a lot of partnership relations with Department of Natural Resources, NRCS, and other conservation groups within the community. So we're building partnerships and coalitions to achieve the goals of protecting our resources and keeping our clean water. It's been a really eye-opening and learning experience, because you think, what is the role of a commissioner in that sort of aspect? But it's really important, because we do, like a lot of these other folks said, we will go out there and we will advise county council and city council on issues, county when they're making executive decisions for the community, as well as helping to advise local people within the agricultural industry, advising of building, say, riparian boundaries to protect water sources and so forth, creating trout habitats, we inspect dams, and so forth. So ultimately, we do report to the state Department of Natural Resources in South Carolina, and that's pretty much what we do. One of our success stories in the short time that I've been in office, which has only been about 5-6 months now, is we created a seed library in one of our food deserts in our community. It's a poor community on the outside of downtown, and the public library there, we got an old card catalog, and we were able to source different kinds of seeds, whether they be pollinator flowers, bushes, fruits, vegetables, and so forth. So if you have a library card in our county now, you can go to this particular library and you can check out seeds, and we made sure that they were sourced locally, non-GMO seeds, organic type sources. And we have built some partnerships with local seed companies to make that happen. It's been a wild success. We can barely keep the seeds in the card catalogs. And other libraries want us to get involved to build one in theirs. Unfortunately, that takes a lot of resources, so we're trying to figure out how to do that. So I think we're going to do some sort of sharing program where you can actually check out online the seeds and they'll ship them over to the library until we can figure out how we can source them and stack them in every library. So I think that's one of the most incredible success stories that we've had in the short time that I've been involved. Does anyone have any questions?
Just curious to know, in your efforts, what kind of resistance do you get from, are there local groups, local business groups that are giving you a hard time about these conservation efforts?
Not at all, actually, and a lot of people actually look to us for a source of knowledge. So we do have books on file, and we have experts in our office that can advise these people. So we've actually not had a lot of resistance. You'll see we have a couple of advocacy groups out there, and they're the ones that are really challenging the community in a way, and we'll sometimes partner with those groups to get the message across, because we don't really have a say in a legislative sort of way, since we're advisory and supervisory.
Are you promoting the hemp industry at all, growing hemp?
Yes, and actually South Carolina, I think this is the second or third season that we have hemp available. They've increased the number of permits to that, so that's actually becoming more of a thing.
Awesome.
There are some controversial issues within the State House discussion over proceeding to eventually legalization of medical marijuana and so forth, but we're actually on a path to that, which I'm actually surprised being in the South.
Well, hemp is not
Right.
the same as THC
Correct.
marijuana plant.
Yep.
Right, okay.
But they don't seem to understand that in a lot of cases.
You need to educate them then,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I can just also follow up on your question. I live in a very rural, very conservative county in upstate New York, where agriculture is still a very important part of the local economy. A number of our Republican office holders are urging the state to allow hemp to be grown as another source of revenue for our local farmers. So they understand the issue. Unfortunately, our Democratic governor does not. So, any other questions for Michael? Okay, thank you everyone for coming. That's all.